Andrew Sterling had spent his entire life believing he was in control. Every decision he made was calculated, every step carefully planned. But all it took was one unexpected moment in a quiet park, one little girl running up to him, throwing her arms around his legs, and calling him daddy, to shatter everything he thought he knew. Andrew Sterling rarely had time for walks. His life was structured, controlled, planned down to the last second. Every hour of his day was accounted for, from morning meetings to late-night calls with international clients. He wasn't the kind of man who strolled through parks, who took in the summer breeze or listened to the sound of children laughing in the distance. But today, for reasons he couldn't quite explain, he had needed an escape. He had left his office earlier than usual, turned off his phone, and walked without a destination. The park was quiet, the sun warm against his skin, the air carrying the scent of freshly cut grass. It had been years since he had taken a moment like this, away from contracts and negotiations, away from the constant weight of his own success. He barely remembered what it felt like to be still. As he moved along the path, his mind drifted to everything waiting for him back at his office. A meeting with investors. A deal that needed closing. A contract that required his final signature. He was already thinking about heading back when something small crashed into him, arms wrapping tightly around his legs. He froze. A little girl stood before him, clutching him as if she had found the most important person in the world. Her long, golden curls framed her delicate face, her bright blue eyes shining as she looked up at him with pure joy. Her tiny hands gripped his suit, holding on so tightly that he felt the warmth of her fingers through the fabric. His mind barely had time to process what was happening before she spoke. "Daddy. You're back." Andrew's entire body stiffened. His first instinct was to step back, to pry her hands from him, to explain that she had the wrong person. But the sheer certainty in her voice made his breath catch. She wasn't questioning. She wasn't hesitant. She knew who she thought he was. He looked around quickly, searching for someone who might be watching, for a frantic parent looking for their child. The park wasn't empty, but no one seemed to be searching for her. He glanced back down at the little girl, her blue eyes still locked onto his with unwavering trust. His voice faltered, something that rarely happened to him. "I think you might be mistaken." The girl's tiny brows furrowed. "No, I'm not." Andrew ran a hand through his hair, trying to make sense of the situation. This was a misunderstanding. It had to be. He had never been married. He had never had children. There was no possible way this little girl could be his daughter. And yet, looking at her, at those curls, those blue eyes, that unwavering determination, he felt something deep in his chest tighten. "What's your name?" he asked carefully, kneeling down so he was eye level with her. "Lily," she said without hesitation. The name didn't trigger any memories, didn't connect to anything in his past. "Lily," he repeated slowly. "Where's your mommy?" "At home," she said cheerfully. "She said you couldn't come back. But I knew she was wrong." His throat went dry. Everything about her words sent alarms blaring in his mind. She spoke with such confidence, as if this wasn't some mistake, as if she had always known he would be here. He swallowed hard. "Lily. I think there's been a mix-up." She shook her head, gripping his suit jacket even tighter. "No mix-up. You're my daddy." Andrew's pulse pounded in his ears. He didn't know what to say, how to convince her that she had the wrong person. But before he could try again, she reached for his hand, her fingers curling around his much larger ones. "I waited for you," she whispered. His heart clenched. He had spent his life closing deals, making decisions that shaped industries, moving forward without ever looking back. But right now, with this little girl looking at him as if he were her entire world, he felt something he had never felt before. Uncertainty. And for the first time, he wasn't sure if he wanted to walk away. Andrew Sterling had faced countless high-pressure situations in his life. He had negotiated billion-dollar deals, outmaneuvered ruthless competitors, and built an empire from nothing. But as he stood in the middle of the park, a 6-year-old girl gripping his hand and looking at him like he was her entire world, he realized he had never been more unprepared for anything. Lily showed no doubt, no hesitation. She had decided that he was her father, and nothing in her expression suggested she was open to being convinced otherwise. Andrew's mind raced as he tried to figure out what to do. He couldn't just leave her standing there, but he also couldn't accept something so impossible without an explanation. He knelt down again, his grip on her tiny hand gentle but firm. "Lily, I need you to help me understand. Why do you think I'm your daddy?" She gave him an exasperated look, as if he had just asked the silliest question in the world. "Because Mommy told me my daddy had curly hair and blue eyes, just like me. And that he had to go far away." Andrew's stomach tightened. He knew this was just a coincidence. There were plenty of men with curly blonde hair and blue eyes. That didn't make him her father. But something about the way she spoke, the certainty in her voice, made him hesitate. He took a slow breath, keeping his voice calm. "Lily, I don't remember ever meeting your mommy." She blinked at him, as if trying to process what he was saying. Then she shook her head, unconvinced. "Maybe you forgot." Andrew let out a quiet breath. He wasn't sure how to handle this conversation with a 6-year-old. He needed to find her mother. He glanced around the park again, but no one seemed to be searching for her. He couldn't just leave her standing here. "Lily, do you know your mommy's phone number?" Lily thought for a moment, then nodded. "It's in my backpack." Andrew looked down, noticing the small, pink backpack hanging loosely from her shoulders. He carefully unzipped it, searching until he found a small laminated card with emergency contact information written in neat handwriting. His breath caught as he read the name. Catherine Monroe. The name hit him like a shockwave, sending memories flooding back into his mind. He hadn't seen Catherine in almost 7 years. She had been a part of his life for only a short time, a whirlwind romance that had ended as quickly as it had begun. He had been young, ambitious, too focused on his future to hold on to anything personal. They had parted ways on uncertain terms, neither of them making an effort to stay in touch. And now, standing before him, was a little girl with Catherine's last name, who looked so much like him that it made his heart pound. His hands tightened slightly around the card as he exhaled sharply. Lily tugged on his sleeve. "Can we go home now?" Andrew looked down at her, his mind spinning. He wasn't ready for this, but he couldn't ignore what was happening. He pulled out his phone and dialed the number. It rang twice before a woman's voice answered, slightly breathless. "Hello." Andrew took a steadying breath. "Catherine?" There was silence. Then, her voice came again, quieter this time. "Andrew?" His grip on the phone tightened. "I think we need to talk." Lily beamed up at him. "See? I told you Mommy was wrong." Andrew had no words. For the first time in his life, he had no idea what came next. The silence on the other end of the phone stretched too long. Andrew could hear Catherine breathing, but she wasn't saying anything. He didn't know if she was shocked, terrified, or trying to figure out how to hang up. He didn't blame her. He wasn't sure what he would have done if their roles were reversed. Lily still clung to his hand, looking up at him expectantly, as if waiting for him to tell her what came next. He had no idea. Finally, Catherine spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Where are you?" Andrew glanced around the park, his pulse still racing. "I'm with Lily." She ran up to me and, he hesitated, glancing down at the little girl. "She thinks I'm her father." Another long pause. When Catherine finally responded, there was something raw in her voice. "Where are you?" she repeated. Andrew gave her the location, and she hung up without another word. He stared at the phone for a second before shoving it back into his pocket. Lily pulled on his arm. "Is Mommy coming?" Andrew nodded, his mind still catching up to everything. "Yeah, she's coming." Lily grinned as if this was exactly how she had imagined the day going. She plopped down onto a nearby bench and swung her legs back and forth, humming to herself. She wasn't worried. She wasn't confused. She had no doubt that everything was exactly the way it was supposed to be. Andrew had spent his entire life planning every move, calculating every risk, making sure there were no surprises. But this moment, this impossible moment, was unraveling everything he thought he knew. 15 minutes passed before he saw Catherine. She was walking fast, her long brown hair pulled back, her blue eyes scanning the park with a mix of anxiety and determination. The second she spotted Lily, her expression softened in relief. Then her gaze shifted to Andrew, and that relief disappeared. Andrew stood as she approached, bracing himself for whatever came next. Catherine stopped a few feet away, her eyes flicking from him to Lily and back again. Her face was unreadable. Lily jumped up from the bench and ran to her. "Mommy, I found Daddy." Catherine crouched down, placing her hands on Lily's shoulders. "Sweetheart, what did I tell you about running off?" Lily pouted. "But I had to find him." "And I did." Catherine closed her eyes for a brief second before letting out a slow breath. She looked at Andrew again, and this time there was something else in her expression, resignation, maybe, or something close to it. She straightened, squaring her shoulders. "Can we talk?" Andrew nodded. "Yeah. We need to." Catherine looked down at Lily. "Baby, why don't you sit here for a few minutes while I talk to your daddy?" She hesitated over the last word, as if she wasn't sure she should say it. Lily didn't seem to notice. She just nodded and sat back on the bench, grabbing a dandelion and twirling it in her fingers. Catherine turned and walked a few steps away. Andrew followed, feeling the weight of what was about to happen settle into his chest. She crossed her arms and met his gaze directly. "I guess I don't have to explain anything." Andrew exhaled, his mind still spinning. "You knew." Her jaw tightened. "Of course I knew." He clenched his fists, fighting the urge to let his frustration show. "And you never told me?" Catherine's expression hardened. "You left, Andrew." His body tensed at her words. "You didn't give me a chance to stay." She let out a humorless laugh. "You made it clear what your priorities were. You had your whole future mapped out, and it didn't include me." Andrew swallowed, a flicker of guilt pressing against his ribs. He had been younger then, too focused on his career, too eager to move forward without looking back. But this wasn't just about them. His voice was quieter when he spoke again. "I didn't know." Catherine's expression softened just a fraction, but there was still a guardedness in her eyes. "Would it have changed anything?" Andrew looked over at Lily, watching her as she carefully plucked the petals from the dandelion, completely unaware of the weight of the conversation happening a few feet away. "Yes," he said without hesitation. "It would have." Catherine let out a slow breath, as if she had been bracing for a different answer. She glanced at Lily, then back at him. "What now?" Andrew didn't know. He had spent the past hour trying to wrap his head around the fact that he had a daughter. He wasn't sure how to move forward, what his place in her life was supposed to be. But one thing he did know, he wasn't walking away. "I don't have all the answers," he admitted. "But I want to know her. I want to be in her life." Catherine studied him carefully, as if trying to determine whether she could trust him with something so fragile. After a long moment, she nodded. "Then prove it." Andrew met her gaze, the weight of the moment settling deep in his chest. "I will." Catherine didn't say anything right away. She just stood there, arms crossed, staring at him like she was waiting for him to realize the weight of what he had just said. Andrew had always been sure of himself. Every decision he made was calculated, precise, planned for the long term. But this wasn't a business deal. This wasn't a strategic move. This was his daughter. And for the first time in his life, he didn't have a plan. Lily was still sitting on the bench, completely oblivious to the silent battle happening between the two adults. She was humming to herself, plucking the last of the dandelion petals and letting them scatter in the breeze. She had no idea how much she had changed everything. Catherine let out a quiet breath, finally breaking the silence. "You want to be in her life?" Andrew met her gaze. "Yes." Her lips pressed together. "That's not something you can just decide in a single afternoon." "I know," he said. "But I also know that I lost 6 years. I can't change that, but I don't want to lose any more." Catherine studied him for a long moment, searching his face for any sign of doubt. He let her look. He had nothing to hide. He wasn't saying this because he felt guilty or because he wanted to fix the past. He was saying it because it was the only truth that mattered to him now. Finally, she sighed, rubbing a hand over her forehead. "This isn't going to be easy." "I'm not expecting it to be," he said. She glanced over at Lily, who was now swinging her legs back and forth, still lost in her own world. Catherine's voice softened slightly. "She's never had a father, Andrew. She's only ever known me. You don't just get to walk in and be part of her life like nothing ever happened." Andrew nodded. "I understand." "Do you?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "Because this isn't just about showing up when it's convenient. It's about being there. Every day. When she's happy, when she's sick, when she's crying at night because she's scared of a thunderstorm. It's not about grand gestures. It's about the little things." Her words hit him harder than he expected. He had spent his entire life building something bigger than himself, creating a legacy that would last beyond him. But she was right. This wasn't about money or success. It was about showing up, about being present in ways that couldn't be measured in contracts or profits. "I'm not going anywhere," he said. Catherine let out a slow breath. "Then start small." Andrew tilted his head slightly. "What do you mean?" She glanced at Lily again before looking back at him. "Come to dinner tonight. Nothing big, nothing formal. Just, come and spend time with her." It was such a simple invitation, yet it felt monumental. Andrew nodded. "I'll be there." Catherine still looked uncertain, but she didn't argue. She turned toward the bench and called out, "Lily, sweetheart, let's go home." Lily hopped off the bench, running back to them with a bright smile. She reached for Catherine's hand, then turned to Andrew expectantly. "Are you coming too?" Andrew hesitated for only a second before answering. "Yes. I'll see you soon." Lily grinned, completely satisfied with that answer. As he watched them walk away, something settled inside him. This wasn't going to be easy. He had no idea how to be a father, no roadmap for what came next. But he knew one thing for certain. He wasn't walking away. Not this time. Andrew stood outside Catherine's house, staring at the door longer than he should have. He had spent his entire life walking into rooms where he belonged. Boardrooms, negotiations, exclusive events, he had never hesitated before stepping inside. But this was different. This wasn't his world, not yet. He took a deep breath and knocked. There was a brief moment of silence before he heard small, hurried footsteps from inside. A second later, the door swung open, and Lily stood there, beaming up at him. Her blue eyes sparkled with excitement, her long curls slightly messy, as if she had been running around the house just moments ago. "You came," she said, reaching for his hand like it was the most natural thing in the world. Andrew smiled despite the nerves twisting in his stomach. "I promised, didn't I?" Lily nodded proudly, then turned and ran back inside, leaving the door open behind her. Andrew stepped in, his eyes immediately scanning the space. The house was warm and inviting, filled with small signs of a life he had never been a part of. Family pictures hung on the walls, most of them just of Lily and Catherine. Drawings were taped to the fridge, and a few scattered toys were in the living room, evidence of a childhood he had missed entirely. Catherine appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She looked at him carefully, as if still trying to decide whether or not he was really going to go through with this. "You're on time," she said. Andrew nodded. "Figured being late to my first dinner wouldn't be a great start." Catherine gave a small smile, then motioned toward the dining table. "Come on, food's ready." Lily was already seated, swinging her legs as she waited. Andrew sat across from her while Catherine placed a serving dish in the center of the table. It was nothing extravagant, just something homemade, something real. He couldn't remember the last time he had sat at a dinner table like this, without his phone, without business on his mind. Lily grabbed her fork and immediately started eating. Halfway through her first bite, she looked at Andrew with wide eyes. "Mommy makes the best spaghetti." Andrew smirked. "I'll be the judge of that." He took a bite, and to his surprise, it was really good. He glanced at Catherine. "Okay, I'll admit, this is better than most restaurants I've been to." Catherine rolled her eyes. "It's just spaghetti." Lily giggled. "No, it's Mommy's spaghetti." Andrew watched them, realizing how natural they were together, how easily they fit into each other's lives. He was the outsider here. Lily pointed at him with her fork. "Do you know how to cook?" Andrew hesitated. Not really." Lily gasped dramatically. "Not even pancakes?" Catherine raised an eyebrow, clearly amused. Andrew sighed in defeat. "No, not even pancakes." Lily looked genuinely concerned. "Then what do you eat?" Andrew chuckled. "Mostly food from restaurants." Lily frowned as if that was the saddest thing she had ever heard. "That's no fun." Catherine smirked. "I have to agree with her on that." Andrew shook his head, realizing how easily they were pulling him into their world. He hadn't expected this. He had thought tonight would be awkward, tense, full of careful conversations. But Lily was making that impossible. She had already decided that he belonged, and she wasn't giving him a choice. As dinner went on, Lily talked non-stop, about her favorite shows, about a butterfly she saw in the backyard, about how she was trying to learn how to jump rope but kept tripping. Andrew listened, fascinated by how much energy one small person could have. At one point, Lily turned to him suddenly. "Are you gonna come again?" Andrew's grip on his fork tightened slightly. Catherine looked at him, waiting for his answer. Andrew met Lily's hopeful gaze. "Yeah, I'd like that." Lily grinned and went back to eating as if she had never doubted his answer. Catherine, however, didn't look away. She was still waiting, still measuring his words, still unsure if he meant them. Andrew didn't blame her. But he wasn't leaving. Not this time. After dinner, Catherine cleared the table while Lily ran off to the living room, dragging a small pile of crayons and paper with her. Andrew stood awkwardly for a moment, unsure if he should offer to help, but Catherine waved him off. "You're a guest," she said, stacking the dishes. Andrew glanced toward the kitchen, then back at her. "I don't want to be just a guest." Catherine paused, her hands tightening slightly on a plate before setting it down. She didn't look at him right away. When she finally did, her expression was unreadable. "Then what do you want to be?" Andrew didn't have an immediate answer. He wanted to be in Lily's life, but he didn't know how to step into a role he had never played before. He had spent years making business decisions, but this wasn't something that could be negotiated. He sighed. "I want to figure that out." Catherine studied him for a long moment before nodding. Then stay. Spend time with her. Andrew didn't need to be told twice. He stepped out of the kitchen, walking toward the living room where Lily sat cross-legged on the floor, her crayons already scattered around her. She looked up and grinned when she saw him. "I'm making a picture," she announced proudly. Andrew lowered himself onto the floor beside her. "What are you drawing?" Lily pointed to the half-finished page. "A family." Andrew felt something shift in his chest. Lily reached for a blue crayon and started coloring in a figure. "This is Mommy." She grabbed a yellow crayon and pointed at another shape. "And this is me." Andrew watched her carefully as she picked up a brown crayon and hesitated. She looked up at him, then back down at the paper. Slowly, she started drawing another figure beside hers. Andrew swallowed hard. "Is that me?" Lily nodded, her focus still on the picture. His throat felt tight. He wasn't sure how to react to something so simple yet so profound. Lily suddenly handed him a crayon. "You have to color your shirt." Andrew took it from her, gripping it a little too tightly as he looked at the drawing. He had signed countless contracts, sealed deals worth millions, but this single moment, this small, innocent gesture, felt more significant than anything he had ever done. Lily leaned against him slightly as she kept coloring. Andrew sat there, realizing that, for the first time in his life, he wasn't in control. And for the first time, he didn't mind. Andrew had never thought much about what it meant to be a father. It wasn't something he had planned for or even considered as part of his life. Yet here he was, sitting on the floor of Catherine's living room, coloring a picture of a family with a 6-year-old girl who had decided without hesitation that he belonged in it. Lily hummed softly as she worked, her small hands carefully pressing each crayon against the paper. Andrew watched her, studying the way her curls fell over her shoulders, the way she stuck her tongue out slightly in concentration. She was so much like him, yet she had spent her entire life without him. He had missed everything. Her first steps. Her first words. Her first birthday. Every scraped knee, every bedtime story, every small moment that made up a childhood. The weight of that realization settled deep in his chest, heavier than any failure he had ever faced in business. Lily set her crayon down and held up the drawing with both hands. "Done." Andrew leaned in, taking in the picture. 3 stick figures stood together, holding hands. Catherine's figure had long brown hair, Lily's had bright yellow curls, and his own was taller, dressed in the brown shirt he had colored in earlier. Above them, Lily had drawn a bright yellow sun and a sky filled with tiny, uneven stars. He swallowed hard. "It's perfect." Lily grinned and pushed the drawing toward him. "It's for you." Andrew hesitated for a second before taking it, running his fingers over the crayon marks. He had held contracts worth millions, had shaken hands on deals that had changed industries. But this simple piece of paper, colored by the tiny hands of a child he barely knew, was worth more than all of it. Catherine walked into the room, drying her hands with a towel. She glanced at them, then at the drawing in Andrew's hands. Her expression softened for just a moment before she caught herself and straightened. "It's getting late," she said gently. Lily pouted. "Do we have to sleep already?" Catherine smiled. "Not yet, but it's time to get ready for bed." Lily sighed dramatically before turning to Andrew. "Can you tuck me in?" Andrew's heart clenched at the question. He had never done that before. He wasn't sure how. But when he looked at Catherine, she didn't protest. She was letting him decide. He nodded. "Yeah, I can do that." Lily jumped up, grabbing his hand and pulling him toward her room. He followed, feeling slightly out of place but unwilling to let the moment slip away. Her bedroom was small but cozy, filled with stuffed animals, books, and drawings pinned to the walls. She climbed onto her bed, pulling the blankets up to her chin as she smiled up at him. "Mommy usually reads me a story," she said. Andrew glanced at the bookshelf and then back at her. "Which one?" Lily thought for a moment before pointing to a book on the nightstand. Andrew picked it up and sat on the edge of the bed, opening it to the first page. His voice was quieter than usual as he read, unsure if he was doing it right, but Lily didn't seem to care. She listened, her eyes drooping slightly with each word. Halfway through the book, she yawned and curled onto her side. "You can finish it tomorrow," she mumbled sleepily. Andrew looked at her for a long moment before gently setting the book down. He had no idea what tomorrow would bring, but he knew one thing. He would be here. Andrew sat beside Lily's bed, watching as her breathing slowed, her tiny body relaxed, and her eyelids fluttered shut. He had never put a child to bed before. He had never sat in a quiet, dimly lit room, listening to the soft hum of a nightlight, feeling the warmth of a small hand resting near his. He had spent years closing deals late into the night, working through endless emails, and attending meetings that stretched long past dinner. But this moment, this simple, quiet moment, felt like the most important thing he had ever done. He reached out and carefully pulled the blanket up over her shoulders. She let out a content sigh in her sleep, her curls spilling across the pillow. His chest tightened as he realized how small she was, how much time he had lost, how much he had missed. He had spent his entire life building something that was supposed to make him feel fulfilled, but nothing he had ever accomplished compared to this. A soft knock at the door made him turn his head. Catherine stood in the doorway, her arms crossed loosely over her chest. She didn't say anything at first, just glanced at Lily, then at him, as if she were seeing something she hadn't expected. Andrew carefully stood, stepping out into the hallway and pulling the door shut behind him. Catherine exhaled and leaned against the wall. "She likes you." Andrew nodded, his throat tight. "She doesn't even know me." Catherine gave him a knowing look. "Kids know more than we think. She trusts you. That means something." Andrew ran a hand over his face. "I still don't know how to do this." Catherine sighed. "No one does. You think I had a handbook on how to raise a child alone? You just figure it out." He looked at her, searching her face for something he wasn't sure he would find. "Do you regret not telling me?" She hesitated. "I used to think I made the right choice. I thought I was protecting her. But seeing you with her now," she shook her head. "I don't know. Maybe I was wrong." Andrew leaned against the opposite wall, crossing his arms. "I don't want to be another person who disappears from her life." Catherine studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. "Then don't." Andrew let out a slow breath. "I meant what I said. I want to be in her life. I don't want this to be a visit or a temporary arrangement. I don't know what it looks like yet, but I know I'm not walking away." Catherine's expression softened. "That's what I needed to hear." A silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable but heavy with everything unspoken. Catherine glanced toward Lily's door, then back at him. "She's going to ask for you tomorrow." Andrew nodded. "I'll be here." Catherine let out a small smile, almost hesitant. "Okay." Andrew felt something settle in his chest, something unfamiliar but right. He had spent years thinking he knew exactly what he wanted. But tonight, standing in a quiet hallway outside his daughter's bedroom, he realized the most important thing he had ever built wasn't his company. It was this. And he wasn't going to lose it. This story is about unexpected second chances, the weight of missed time, and the quiet, powerful moments that redefine a person's life. Andrew Sterling begins as a man who believes he has control over everything, his career, his future, his success. But fate has a way of humbling even the most calculated people. When Lily enters his life, she doesn't just present him with a shocking truth, she forces him to reevaluate everything he thought mattered. What makes this story compelling is that Andrew doesn't magically become the perfect father overnight. He struggles. He hesitates. He questions whether he's capable of filling the role that life has unexpectedly placed before him. But the beauty of his journey is in his choice to stay, to learn, to embrace the uncertainty instead of running from it. Catherine adds another layer to the story. She isn't just an ex who kept a secret, she's a mother who made a difficult choice based on the circumstances she faced. Her guardedness is realistic, and her reluctance to immediately trust Andrew again makes the story feel more grounded. She doesn't want grand gestures, she wants consistency, reliability, and proof that Andrew is serious. Lily, in her innocence, is the heart of the story. She doesn't carry the weight of the past. She simply knows that she's found her father, and in her mind, that means he belongs in her life. She doesn't care about business deals or lost years, she only cares about the love and presence of the people around her. The ending is satisfying because it doesn't tie everything up neatly. There's no perfect resolution, no instant transformation. Instead, there's a promise, an understanding that love and family are things that have to be built over time. Andrew doesn't know exactly what the future looks like, but he knows he's not walking away. And sometimes, that's enough to begin again.